Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. It's a pleasure today to be joined by Andrew Busby, who's founder at Retail Reflections, co-founder at SafePrem Solutions, has contributed to Forbes, is a top 10 retail influencer and an IBM futurist. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for having me.
No, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Now, we've known each other for a while, but there might be some listeners that aren't familiar with you. So it'd be good if you can give us some career history and background.
Yeah, sure. So my retail journey started just over 20 years ago. I joined Kingfisher, and specifically Superdrug. And that, for the older listeners, will be in the days when Kingfisher comprised, well, obviously B&Q, as it still has, but it was also Woolies, Comet, Superdrug, Entertainment UK, one or two other smaller ones. So quite a different beast to the organisation that it is today. So, and that really set me off on my retail journey. I always think that retail can be for some people a little bit Marmite. I happen to love it. And so I spent a number of years there, and that really taught me an awful lot about retail and all the different functions and so forth. So Superdrug was a great training ground, if you like, from that respect. And then I spent probably the best part of the next 13, 14 years in various business development roles, which I think is where our paths crossed. I worked for a number of technology companies, but always working with pretty much, I think, tier one UK retailers, the likes of Debenhams, Arcadia, Dixons, John Lewis, people like that, and loved that. And then really was able to do the thing that I guess had always for some time wanted to do, and that's when I set up Retail Reflections to write and speak about retail, about trends, about the high street, about consumer, and so forth. And that's been a fantastic journey. It's taken me all over the world, speaking at conferences. I've written, as you said earlier in the introduction, I've written for Forbes. I write for a number of other publications, and it's just great because retail is fantastic. I've always said that I think it's the most relevant sector, and by that I mean that we all have retail in our lives too, because we all shop to greater or lesser extents, and retail brands are very much part of our lives. So, and in particular in these difficult COVID times, unfortunately, it's giving even more to write and speak about, which I guess is kind of brings us back to why we're here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, you're right. Our paths crossed. It must have been a good probably 15, 16 years ago now, and I think we've kept in touch on and off since. And again, for those listening, I'd encourage you to follow Andrew certainly on LinkedIn, because some of the content's amazing and some of the stuff that you kind of surface for the wider community. So give him a follow or connect, because some great content you push out, Andrew.
Thank you.
Let's kick off then. Lots and lots in the press over the last 6 months because of COVID and where the world is, and I'm sure be more going forward. But one of the things that's become really acute is the impact going local, I don't know what you want to call it really, of us being more home-based, us not travelling, which has a massive impact because not many people live in city centres. Certainly London and the bigger ones, lots of people travel into work. They're there for offices are there. We've got Pretz, Costas, all the other brands that are local that people get their lunch from or have something to eat after work. They've seen a massive impact, as is the whole world. But if we think about the whole working from home piece, I know you've again published some articles online. Where's your head at in terms of how this is going to pan out for kind of city centres and those organisations that rely on people being there in the offices to generate their income?
Yeah, I think that the whole working from home thing is going to mature. And first of all, I think that the first thing to say is that, if not already, but we're going to look back and think, well, why on earth did we all spend upwards of 2 hours each way of our day traveling to our place of work, getting on crowded train, probably with nowhere to sit, crammed in with other people, only then to exchange that for, say, in the case of London, an underground train, which is even more cramped. It was just an awful, awful experience. And of course, it was costly and so forth. And I think that both employers and employees have really woken up to that. And so, what I think the new model is going to be is more along the lines of, yes, working from home a certain percentage of the week, working from the office because nothing beats face-to-face. We know that. But we also know now that we don't have to be doing that every single day of the week. And then the other thing, which I think is a new thing, which we're starting to see, is people working not from home, but from their local high street. So in other words, for various reasons, for a lot of us, it's not convenient to be working from home all the time. We might have a young family. We could have a dog that insists on barking at just the wrong time on a podcast like this. Any other reason you care to mention. So we want to get out and we want to have a change of scenery. So I can see that there's going to be a lot of serviced offices which are going to spring up on our high streets, which I think is a great thing for our high streets. We're already starting to see some of the pubs pivoting towards allowing people and encouraging people to go and use them during the daytime as an office, encouraging them through unlimited tea and coffee throughout the day. Unfortunately, not beer or wine, but that's probably a good thing. So I think that we're going to see that. This whole thing about not being as productive when you're working or shopping from home, if you like, you're supposedly working, but we all thought that everybody was off on a jolly and doing anything other than work. Well, of course, we now know that's simply not true. We are working and we're probably more productive. I'd been working from home. My typical week before all this started was, I'm based in Sussex. I'm about an hour from the centre of London. So a typical week would be 1, maybe 2 days working from home, 1, maybe 2 days in meetings in London. And then depending on the time of year, if it's conference season, then I could either be traveling or I could be attending conferences, either to speak or as a delegate in this country. And that was the kind of typical mix of it. When you are at home, you don't stop at 5 or 5:30 or whatever. I think all of us probably tend to carry on longer than perhaps we really should. So we're going to find a balance. But for city centres, the message there is that for the likes of all the coffee bars and the retailers and so forth, they're really having to rethink where is their customer, whether they're physical or online. Their customers moved, and they need to go where their customer is. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons from all of this. Go where your customer is. I saw some stats from a friend of mine, Polly Barnfield, runs, or maybe. And they did some amazing stats on social media engagement and interaction. And it was quite frightening. During lockdown, if you cast our minds back to the time when non-essential retail wasn't able to open, virtually all the independent retailers, and they were monitoring thousands upon thousands of them, that none of them were engaging on social media with their customers. They just stopped. But if you take the likes of, let's say, an ASOS or Primark, so there you go, one completely online, one completely brick and mortar, they both continued to engage with their customers. And certainly in the case of Primark, as we know, it paid dividends when we came out of that enforced lockdown on non-essential retail earlier this year.
Yeah, it's really interesting just picking up on a few of those points. Yeah, one, it will be my dog that barks if you hear it in this podcast. 2, actually, our local pub offers free tea and coffee, and then you get a pint at the end of the day, which is
that sounds good.
I don't know what they class as the end of the day though. I don't know if it's pre-midday or whatever. You can see that going horribly wrong.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere in the world.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. And then I agree that this whole myth of people raising an eyebrow prior to the whole lockdown thing when you're working from home, or there being, the in-joke of really, you'll be on the PlayStation or surfing. I honestly believe that people are working harder or even longer hours, not necessarily harder than before. And that danger is that we just burn out at home rather than at work. So I like that kind of couple of days at home, couple of days in the office or out approach that I think some people are there now, and hopefully more people will get there in the future, because it gives us a nice balance. I think the one thing we need to remember through all this is we are human beings, and human beings crave interaction with other human beings.
Yes.
So being at home, you've got your family and your animals and your pets and whatever, but actually there's only so much conversation that you can have within that bubble. Certainly about work, if the people you live with aren't necessarily involved in your day-to-day work as well. So I hope we get to some sort of nice new pattern. I think the watch out for me still is we know where we can and can't go because that's what we're told at the moment. What we've not seen is probably the psychological impact of all this that comes out in 12, 18 months' time, of the impact of people not having contact.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, and that's a big worry with this. And I was speaking to the CEO of the Retail Trust, Chris Brooke-Carter, and that was for a piece I was writing. And this is all about, because we know the Retail Trust support past and present retail workers, whether they have financial hardship or mental health issues. And they are predicting, in their words, a tsunami of mental health issues just around the corner. And I think we really do have to be very, very aware of that. And the fallout, the whether it be the law of unintended consequences or the collateral damage, if you like, from the direct action which is being taken. And by that, I'm referring to the lockdowns and so forth, which, as we speak today, we're right in the middle, if you like, across the country of various with a 3-tier system of more lockdowns likely to go into a national so-called circuit breaker lockdown. And the virus isn't the only thing that's threatening us, and I think that's the key to a lot of this. We've got to realise that there are a lot of other threats to us, which are probably in their own way just as harmful.
Yeah, we're kind of all consumed about what the future looks like. I think we again need to remember the future's always been uncertain. This is just a different type of uncertainty. If we were able to predict the future, me and you probably wouldn't be doing this podcast. We'd be on our isolated yacht somewhere in the Bahamas. After winning the lottery. So with all the uncertainty, clearly there's been a change in the way we do things. Certainly around consumer behaviour in terms of buying, so less journeys out to shops, clearly more going through online channels. What are your thoughts on how that will pan out in terms of the next 6, 12, 18 months? Is it going to still drive towards online? Will we see a big swing back into bricks and mortar, or will it be something completely different?
I think we're going to continue to see that drive to online. I think this Christmas is going to be huge. That's why people like Helen Dickinson at the British Retail Consortium, I saw something on social media encouraging people to go out and start their Christmas shopping early. And the message is clear. Retailers, and particularly their final mile delivery partners, are extremely worried that there's going to be an enormous spike this Christmas in online shopping in the last week, 10 days, 2 weeks of the lead up in the peak trading period towards Christmas. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But other than that, online, I think according to the ONS, it's hit something like 30%. It had been hovering around about, before all this began, back in February, March time, it had been hovering around 20% for some while. Some people that I've spoken to feel that it could hit 50%, and that was before the COVID coronavirus pandemic. And I think they're probably right. The consequences and the implications of that, of course, are huge. And I think for retailers, one of the tricks now is to try to look into their crystal ball and predict how much of that new online spend is going to remain there and how much will, as you said, will return to bricks and mortar. I don't think much of it is going to return because people, despite all the talk of perhaps having a vaccine, which I don't see as an answer, because number one, the vaccine may or may not be effective. It may or may not give us immunity. It might be like the flu vaccine. And we know, sadly, that there's a percentage of the population who will refuse to have it. So, let's not kid ourselves about that. We need to learn to live with this. But for the foreseeable future, and I certainly think within the timescale that you mentioned there, the next 6 to 12 months, people are going to remain fearful. And not only that, let's face it, the fun and the spontaneity has largely been taken out of retail and hospitality. It's not the same experience. Parts of it are better. For example, I think that we will all get used to making bookings. If we're going into a pub or a restaurant, we'll be used to going and sitting at a table and ordering from our phones, and the food or the drinks will come. And I think more of that will apply retail, making bookings, making appointments, and so forth. One of the reasons for that, because we don't want to be in a crowded indoor space with people. And I think as we move into the winter, that will become more acute, and people will be more focused on the fact that they don't want to be near other people. I mean, I was in a branch of Boots just to pick up something just the other day, and I was looking at the shelf and so forth, and I was suddenly aware of somebody stood next to me, and they weren't moving. And then after a while, I turned around, and it was an elderly lady, and she wanted me to move right out of the way so that she could come past down the aisle, and we were both obviously wearing masks, but she was clearly that anxious about the perceived or real threat from this virus that she wanted me to move right out of her way so that she could come past. And it kind of made me feel, well, on the one hand, that's a very laudable attitude to take, and it's responsible, and so on and so forth. But if you're really that anxious about it, then maybe coming out in public isn't the right thing for you to do. And in that respect, I do think that both in a retail context and a broader context, that we need to find a way to protect our more vulnerable whilst allowing those that this is usually, not always, but in the vast, vast majority of cases, a mild infection, much like either a cold or perhaps flu. We need to let that majority of the population get on with their lives and get on with business, because the collateral damage from this, I think, is outweighing, if you like, the damage which is directly attributable to the virus.
In my mind, I agree. I think there's a tendency that we'll see more in-store specials to try and drive footfall. It's almost the reverse of online specials now. I think the booking thing's really interesting, because if you think back to some of our where we met historically, if you think back to one of the biggest challenges in retail, it's about demand. And in hospitality, how do you know when someone's coming in? So how do you predict when someone's coming in so you get the right balance of staff? So if we go to more of a model where people are allocated time slots, it presents opportunity to get the right people there to deliver the personal shopping experience or the retail experience, wherever you want to class it these days, to upsell, because you can predict your demand a lot easier. Now, it's not ideal because it might be less demand, but it's that, sell more to less kind of approach.
Yes.
I don't know it answers the questions, but then there will be opportunity presented. However this pans out, it's for those that grasp it and take it. I still struggle shopping online versus bricks and mortar, because I do like to have a wander around a shop, and having, like you, worked in them, it's kind of somewhere I feel comfortable and at home, and see what just comes in front of me or what catches my eye. I always think when I'm shopping online, especially fashion, I almost don't know what I've missed.
Yes. Yeah, there was this famous line, wasn't there, from the boss of Boxpark, Roger Wade, a couple of years ago, when he said that online is like watching fireworks on TV. For me, that really encapsulates it. It doesn't matter how good online gets, it can never replace the full sensory experience you get when you go into a store. And yeah, like you, I mean, we've both been retailers, we've been in the industry for long enough, and I guess that when we're going out and we're going shopping or just browsing, looking around, we're perhaps looking at it through slightly different eyes. But equally, certainly for me, there is an enjoyment in that, and I like to see new and interesting and innovative, perhaps visual merchandising or layout of a store, or something that they've got there that you don't expect. I always remember going to the opening day of the new Primark store in Birmingham. And the thing that struck me was that around every corner there was something that you didn't really expect from a Primark store. And that, I think, that the air of mystery, if you like. If you remember when you were young, or perhaps even now, and you were taken to perhaps a natural history museum or the science museum in London, and it was exciting because there was a surprise around every corner. It was a kind of like a voyage of discovery. And I think that's what possibly all shops, certainly department stores, but all retail really needs to try to follow, if individual brands are going to get people back into their stores.
It's that sense of trying to think the last the last new store I went into that kind of evoked that, really. Some of the Lego stuff I've seen has been quite cool. When I've been in various countries, they have a nice way of making it appeal to adults and children, so they kind of get you at both ends of the market. The other thing I've been thinking about as well is collaboration. Lots of the big box retailers, probably other than supermarkets, are relatively overspaced pre-COVID and will be more so post. So I think we're going to see more, I'll say bizarre collaborations, because that's probably the only way I can think at the moment, of brands you would never expect to be a marriage come together to use the space more effectively for both. So we end up with, I think Next have done a couple of interesting ones where they've had a car showroom at the bottom of one of the stores, and clearly they've got the Costa ones and all other sorts of Paperchase, I think, are in a few as well, aren't they? So I think, like you, there's that whole, can you take your brand to where the customers are, which may mean we see cohabiting or collaboration on more retail parks or in town centres that we would never have dreamt of.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it makes it more exciting. It makes it more interesting. I think we are going to see more instances of that. The other thing that I think that, although I don't really see too much evidence of this, but it came to mind when Rishi Sunak, who I thought had been playing a blinder up until this point, the other day suggested that musicians and people in the arts ought to retrain, and I thought that was particularly idiotic thing to say. And of course, we then all learnt about the government website where you can go on. I don't know if you have, Simon, but I just for giggles went onto it and took the reskilling assessment. And one of the jobs it suggested I should retrain to become was a horse trainer. Horses and I've got no interest in them whatsoever. There are plenty of other ridiculous things there. I think I heard a story of a 57-year-old woman who was, it was suggested that she retrained to become a professional boxer. So it got me thinking about the musician part of that, and why not why not say the supermarkets employ them? And so when you go into your supermarket, you've got live music from perhaps a string quartet or, a smaller band or whatever. What's to stop that? We have instances of that with the Salvation Army at Christmas, but why not on a more permanent all round and change the whole shopping experience of a supermarket? Because again, let's face it, doing our grocery shopping is pretty utilitarian, with self-service and scan as you go and things like that. They're trying to make it a bit more streamlined, a bit easier, but fundamentally it's not a brilliant experience. So why not employ some of these musicians for the time being whilst they're not able to ply their trade as they had previously? And I think it's, whether that's the answer, of course, is quite another matter, but I think that's what retail needs to be doing. It really, we always talk about, haven't we? We've talked for years about digital transformation, innovation, frictionless, omnichannel, experiential, all the terms that I loathe. We really are at a time now when they do need to think like that. Unfortunately, for a lot of them, I think that what they're spending most of their time doing is budgeting and rebudgeting and financial forecasting and running scenarios, because the future is very, very unclear. I don't think there's any way of really predicting where we're going to be, 6 months from now, let alone in the case of our friends over at John Lewis. They feel that they can predict, up to 5 years from now, which I wish I had their crystal ball. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I'd be predicting lottery numbers, not anything else if I had that. I think I can top your government website one. So mine came out, and I've no idea what the algorithm, how it works, or how it got to this, as a colon hydrotherapist.
Now you're talking. Yeah, there's a big demand for them, whatever the hell that is.
Clearly there is.
Brilliant.
So I have no idea how that works. But so there's a couple of big things on the horizon, isn't there? There's Halloween, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, however that's going to pan out this year, and then clearly Christmas. Are you expecting those to be primarily driven through online again, as we talked about before? Or I've not seen, other than the supermarkets, I've not seen much Halloween, maybe a couple of discounters. So whether it's going to be as big, clearly, I think trick or treat, fireworks night's probably going to be a bit of a non-event this year because of the obvious. So how do you think smart retailers will play that? Because I always think Black Friday week kind of nowadays and the kind of Cyber Week afterwards, you can almost cannibalize your Christmas sales by just pulling stuff forward at a at a discount.
Yeah, they do, don't they? I mean, to take Halloween first, I read a little while ago that in terms of if you're a brick and mortar retail, in terms of sales density per square foot, that's the biggest of the year. I think, well, obviously, as we know, I'm not particularly with Halloween and trick or treat. I think it's one of these American imports that they've probably done enough. They've done it to death, and do we really need it? But having said all of that, both of those, they're loved by children, and they look forward to them. I remember certainly Guy Fawkes and I used to look forward to that for months. So that's going to be denied them, and could possibly be throughout the rest of the United Kingdom as well. Moving ahead, Black Friday, I've always had mixed views about. Fundamentally, I think it dilutes it. It just stretches the peak trading season from Christmas. Now, the ironic thing is that we're being encouraged this year to do that, to ease the burden in the last couple of weeks or so. I think that there's two schools of thought here. So, one, when we get to Black Friday, furlough would have ended, and sadly, there's probably going to be more people who would have been made redundant. So they're going to have, for both that and Christmas, they're going to have less disposable income. So they're really going to be pulling in their belts. There'll be others who are probably in a more fortunate position, and they will think, well, you know what, this year's been, for all of us, it's been pretty rubbish, hasn't it? There are probably other words to describe it eloquently, but I'll leave them aside for now. That being the case, they're going to probably think, well, actually, do you know what? I've made so many sacrifices. We haven't gone away as a family. So we're going to treat ourselves, and we're going to treat ourselves to whatever, whether it be presents for each other at Christmas, or we're going to splash out on stuff for the home at Black Friday. We know sales of items for the home have increased and will probably continue to do so as more and more people, I think, are, really fatigued by all of this. There's no end in sight to it. Everything is combining to make us pretty fed up, really. So one of the ways to deal with that, I think, is to treat ourselves. And so it'll be very, very interesting to see. I can't, to be honest, I wouldn't like to call it, which makes me no good whatsoever to retailers, but I think it's going to be extremely difficult to call both Black Friday and Christmas this year.
Like you, I think it'll merge potentially one into the other as there's an initial hit of Christmas special items that come to the market that sell out or struggled to get delivered. And I think once we start hearing in the press about some of the bigger organisations that are potentially behind or struggling with stock, I think then there'll be a spike of people wanting to get their stuff in. And there's always a last minute surge, isn't there, when people start discounting. The challenge will be, I suppose, they have to start discounting earlier if they're assuming it's going to get delivered via an online channel, because you've got to give time to get it there for Christmas. I don't know. I have visions of it all going well and visions of horror stories in the press after Christmas of little Billy and little Johnny who didn't get their stuff delivered by Mr. Big Retailer X and Y and, got it after Christmas. And when it arrived, it was already in the sale at half price. I don't know, like you, which way it's going to go. I think there'll be a bit of both is probably the reality.
I think we're going to see plenty of that, unfortunately. I think with somebody was asking me the other day what I felt about grocery for this Christmas, and I said I think it's going to be a very, very good year for grocers, and the reason for that is that there are going to be less and less people who will be going out for Christmas Day or around the Christmas period. So that says to me that they're probably going to, for the reasons I outlined previously, they're probably going to spend more on their Christmas meal and all the trimmings around it. And I'm meaning there all the, whatever happens to be that, for example, they might go for the luxury crackers rather than the bargain basement, or they'll go for, the best turkey or the whatever it happens to be. And they'll get some really, really nice wine in to have for the meal. I think people are probably going to feel like that more than ever before. And because there'll simply be the volume, because people aren't going to be going out booking restaurants, because for a lot of people that means having the family together, which quite often means more than 6 people, which, as we know, isn't allowed. So I think supermarkets will do quite well out of this. But again, it is difficult. We're going to see it all kind of pan out over the next over the next few weeks. I think, where the thing that kind of kicks it off for me symbolically is when, again, at the time of recording this, it's coming up in a few days' time. That's when the clocks go back, because then we get the darker evenings, then we've got Halloween, and then all of a sudden, and we know, you and I both know, Simon, that peak trading and Christmas point of sale usually goes out the first weekend of November. That's when it all kicks off for retail. And so we'll see that. And then I think combined with this message to shop earlier for Christmas and so forth, we're really going to start to see it. I hope people don't spend unwisely, but I think that there's going to be a lot of, let's max the credit card and then just let that sort itself out in January. Because we're going to enjoy ourselves, because we've had a pretty rotten year, so we deserve this. I think that's generally going to be the attitude.
Be interesting. I read in the paper, I think it was at the weekend, they were predicting less turkey sales this year. There'd been a dramatic reduction in the numbers from supermarkets. So again, that'll be interesting if we think people in effect are going to trade up for the special day. There might not be the turkeys there on the shelf. So we'll see what we're all eating on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And we're going to do a separate podcast on this one, but the other company that you're involved and co-founder of, so SafePrem Solutions, do you want to just give us a kind of 1 minute intro to that so we can set that up for the next podcast?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that was really the genesis for the idea came from that when I got involved with somebody who was he was selling traffic light systems for retailers so that they could regulate the flow of people into the store. And then I was introduced to one or two other companies that were all kind of around this idea of making premises safer. So one that we work with, Qdini, they manage bookings and appointments, and amongst other things, and work with a lot of top retailers doing that. Another one, the Indoor Lab, who are based in California, they work with particularly airports and hotels. So not now, but they can work with retailers certainly, and they're working with Home Depot in the US. And think of, for those who are familiar with it, think of store analytics, but on steroids. So this is accurate down to a couple of centimeters and can map the flow of people, can identify staff from customers, and you can really see where people are congregating, and it can be used for all sorts of things. Given all that, we thought that, and it seemed that nobody else was doing this. Nobody else was curating all these organizations into one place. And so what we're doing, and we're right in the middle of it at the moment, we soft launched a few weeks ago. We believe that we're the world's first independent directory portal for COVID secure solutions. And so we're curating all these. We've got partners. We're developing a directory which people will be able to access. So in other words, it's kind of a one-stop shop of all the best of breed solutions to keep your premises safe and secure from the virus and bacteria and so forth.
Amazing. Well, I'd urge everyone to look out for that episode, because it'll be me, you and your co-founder Pat on that one. So that'll be a really interesting one to get into the detail of exactly what you guys are doing and where you're looking to take that. So Andrew, it's been a fascinating chat. We could talk all day about this stuff and put our predictions out there. I'm sure we got some stuff right, and no doubt we'll get some stuff wrong. If people want to speak to you and find out more about the stuff you do, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so the Retail Reflections website is www.retail-reflections.co.uk, and you'll see my contact details there. Or can email me at andrew@retail-reflections.co.uk. That's probably the best ways to get hold of me.
Awesome. Appreciate that. So thanks for coming on. Final question from me, and you've hopefully got some decent experience to draw on for this one. What's the best bit of business advice you've ever been given?
That's a good one. I would have to say that, and again, this applies very much in a retail context, and I found throughout my working life, I found more and more perhaps, we're all told to look at the data and so on and so forth, and insights from the data, and yes, we very much need to use that, data-driven insights and so on and so forth, and analytics, yes, there's always a place for that. Ultimately, I would suggest trust your instincts. Trust your instinct, because usually, on the one hand, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And on the other hand, if it feels, yeah, this is the right thing to be doing, for whatever reason, whether it be for your business, for your customers, for the planet, perhaps. If it feels like it's the right thing, then usually it is. So trust your instinct, I would say.
Like that. That's a really good one. Brilliant. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll catch up on the next one around SafePrem Solutions. Take care until then.
Thanks for having me.